Have you ever met someone who thought the world belonged to them? Someone who believed that people were just things, to be used and then forgotten? This is a story about a man like that. His name was Leo, and he was a millionaire who lived in a world of glass towers and private jets. And this is the story of Anna, the woman who cleaned his home, a woman of quiet strength who became invisible to him the moment she was no longer useful. It all began in a place that should be filled with joy, but for Anna, it felt like a prison. A cold, sterile hospital room. She lay in the bed, exhausted, her body trembling from the effort of bringing a new life into the world. In her arms, she cradled her newborn son, a tiny, perfect baby boy. Her heart was a mix of overwhelming love and sheer terror. And standing beside the bed, casting a long shadow over them both, was Leo. He wasn't there out of love or support. He was there out of cold, hard pride. He looked at Anna, not with compassion, but with disgust. He looked at the baby, not with wonder, but as a problem. And then he spoke the words that would break Anna's world into a million pieces. Without even leaning down to see his son's face, he said, flatly, "This child isn't mine." The words hung in the air, icy and final. Anna felt her breath catch in her throat. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. She could only watch as the father of her child turned his back and walked out of the room, his expensive shoes clicking on the floor until the sound faded away. For Leo, it was over. He had buried the problem. But for Anna, everything was just beginning. You see, their story didn't start in that hospital. It started months before, in the silence of Leo's mansion. Anna was just the maid, a background character in his luxurious life. But one night, after too much whiskey, Leo's loneliness met his arrogance. He saw Anna not as a person, but as a convenience. For him, it was a meaningless moment. By morning, he was back to being the powerful millionaire, and she was back to being the invisible maid. But life has a way of creating consequences, even for men like Leo. When Anna discovered she was pregnant and told him, his response was as cold as you'd expect. He slid an envelope stuffed with cash across his polished desk. "Handle it," he said, his voice empty. When she refused, when she told him she would keep her baby, his disgust turned to fury. "Don't you dare think you can trap me with a child," he snarled. "I don't want you. I don't want it." So Anna faced the next 9 months alone. She endured the whispers, the judgmental stares, the exhausting work, all while carrying the weight of his rejection. She was terrified, but her love for her unborn child made her strong. And now here she was, alone in a hospital room, holding a baby whose father had just disowned him with a single, heartless sentence. She pulled her son closer, tears finally streaming down her face, and made a silent promise. She would protect him. She would love him enough for 2 parents. She would survive this. But what she didn't know was that the story was far from over. Because the truth has a powerful voice, and it was about to start whispering in Leo's ear. Back in his silent mansion, Leo tried to forget. He poured his whiskey, stared out at the city lights, and told himself he had done the right thing. He surrounded himself with wealthy friends who slapped him on the back and told him what he wanted to hear. "You dodged a bullet, Leo," they'd say. "Women like that, they see a rich man and see an opportunity. You were smart to walk away." But their words started to feel hollow. The image of Anna in that hospital bed, clutching their son, began to haunt him. It would flash in his mind during business meetings. The sound of a baby crying on the street would make him flinch. His own expensive silence became a torment. A tiny, nagging voice of doubt had been planted in his mind, and it was growing. That little voice, that seed of doubt, eventually grew into a desperate, gnawing curiosity. He had to know. He had to see. Days later, he found himself driving back to the hospital, his heart pounding in his chest. He told himself it was just a check, to put his mind at ease once and for all. He stood, hidden in the doorway of her room, his expensive suit feeling like a costume. And there she was, Anna. She was sitting in a chair by the window, bathed in soft afternoon light, gently rocking the baby. She looked tired, but there was a calm strength about her now. She adjusted the little blue blanket around the baby, and as she did, the infant blinked his eyes open. And in that moment, Leo's whole world shattered. The baby's eyes were a distinct, piercing shade of gray. A steely, cool gray. They were the exact same eyes that stared back at Leo every morning from his own mirror. They were his father's eyes, his grandfather's eyes, an undeniable, genetic truth staring right back at him from his son's tiny face. It was like a physical blow. Leo stumbled back into the hallway, his breath catching in his throat. The walls of his arrogance, his pride, his entire self-built world came crashing down around him. He hadn't just walked away from a woman. He had denied his own flesh and blood. He had rejected his son, his heir, with a cruelty he suddenly couldn't comprehend. All the money in the world couldn't change the truth he saw in that baby's eyes. He was the father. Driven by a storm of guilt and shame, he marched back into the room and confronted Anna. "Anna, he began, but the words felt useless. She looked up at him, and her gaze wasn't pleading anymore. It was hard. It was sharp. "You used me like I was nothing," she whispered, her voice low and trembling with a pain that had been festering for months. "You left me to carry him alone. You looked at our son and you called him a lie. You don't deserve to hold him now." Her words didn't make him angry. They cut him deeper than any business rival ever could. She was right. He was the one who was a lie. The weight of what he had done, a weight heavier than all his millions, finally crushed him. He had no comeback, no excuse. He just turned and walked away, a broken man finally seeing the world not as he wanted it to be, but as it truly was. Leo didn't go home to his mansion that night. He drove through the rain, his mind a whirlwind of shame and regret. The man who had everything now felt like he had nothing. The truth of his son's eyes had shattered the person he used to be. And from those broken pieces, a new man was desperately trying to emerge. A few nights later, he found himself standing outside a small, modest apartment building. The air smelled of damp concrete and city life, a world away from his perfumed halls. He knocked on Anna's door. When she opened it, her face was hard, her body blocking the entrance. She was protecting her son. From him. I need to see him," Leo pleaded, his voice ragged. Reluctantly, she let him in. The apartment was small but warm, filled with the soft light of a single lamp. And there, in a simple crib by the window, was his son. Leo walked over, his heart pounding. He looked down at the sleeping baby, and as if sensing his presence, the infant stirred. His eyes fluttered open. Those same steel-gray eyes looked up, not with judgment, but with innocent curiosity. And that's when Leo broke. The mighty millionaire fell to his knees beside the crib, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I was wrong," he whispered, his face wet with tears. "He's mine. I see him now." Anna stood watching, her arms crossed. The scars he had given her were deep. "You can't just say sorry, Leo," she said, her voice steady but sad. "You can't erase the months I spent alone and scared. You can't undo what you said in that hospital." He looked up at her, completely stripped of his pride. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be different." And so, he began the slow, hard work of redemption. He started showing up every day. Not with lawyers or grand gestures, but with a humble heart. At first, he was clumsy. He fumbled with bottle warmers. He put diapers on backwards. His attempts to rock the baby to sleep were stiff and awkward. Anna watched him, always guarded, waiting for him to give up. But he didn't. He kept coming back. He learned the rhythm of his son's needs. He learned which lullaby could calm his cries. He would sit for hours, just holding him, whispering stories of a future he promised would be better. And then, one ordinary afternoon, it happened. Leo was feeding his son a bottle. The baby finished, and his tiny, perfect hand reached out and wrapped around Leo's finger. He held on tight. In that simple, fragile grip, Leo felt it. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was something even more powerful, trust. And a love so pure, it made every dollar he'd ever earned feel worthless. He finally understood what true wealth was. Years later, their little boy grew up strong and happy. He never knew the story of the hospital. His only memory of his father was a man who was always there, at his soccer games, helping with his homework, holding his hand when he was scared. Leo's life was no longer measured in stock prices, but in the sound of his son's laughter. He had traded the riches of the world for the riches of the heart, and he never, ever looked back. So what do you think? Can a person truly change? Can love really undo the damage of a cruel past? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to choose love, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching, and remember, the richest people aren't always the ones with the most money.